All right, we are live. My name is Dr. Sharnael Wolverton Sihan, and I am very excited about this topic. I have a little bit of experience, but I'm like to know a lot more, and I'd like to jump in a lot more. I started reading about body electronics a bit, and was very intrigued and fascinated by it, just because Robert Tennyson Stevens was my mentor before he just passed. And of course, he studied with Dr. Ray. So we have a guest here, Graham Bennett, who's very fluid in this topic. And so I'm really, really excited. Welcome to the show, Graham.
Oh, thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Awesome. Well, before we get started, I have a few just little kind of technical things. Please do consider partnering with us to keep the channel going. We have a membership here. If you cannot partner with us on the membership, other things that you could do is share the content, do all the things for the algorithm, but also because I really think this information is important for people to get. And I think they could be encouraged and maybe get some answers and some solutions to some health issues that they have maybe been struggling with. That all those things help us very much so. And also you can go to drsharnel.com where I have a ton of services and all the back shows that we've had. There's just a lot of different information there. So check that out. But anyway, without further ado, I was going to explain just a little bit how I found you because we shared a little bit about it earlier, but for those of you who are aware of body electronics, I'm actually going to let him define his version. But Bob Tennyson, he has done body electronics for years, and he studied with a man named Dr. Ray. And Bob always spoke really highly of him. I know some weird things kind of happened towards the end. I'm not really, want to focus on that. But the technical and the science part of what he did and what he gave to us on the planet has just been amazing. And I actually went through a body electronics week with some people right before I met Graham, actually. And because I was going to this event, I wanted to study up on it and kind of know what was going to happen and what to expect, how to prep for it, because there is a bit of preparation. And so I had found this only one book that I could find on body electronics. And this is by Thomas Chavez. But he actually mentions Graham in the book and has a lot of different in a positive way. And I just reached out to Graham. When was this? A few months ago. This was in
Yep.
like October or maybe even September last year. And just was like, oh my goodness, I have to have this guy on the show. I bought some of your information and your which I should have brought the book that maybe you have your books that you could show. And he has services and different things. But well, I just want to say welcome, and I'd love to know your background. Like, how did you get involved with Dr. Ray? How did you get involved with body electronics? What is body electronics? All of that.
Yeah. Well, I think it's probably quite a similar path for a lot of people who have been through significant changes in their life. There's often some sort of event that's occurred. In my case, I was really ill. This is about actually 30 years ago this year. I was really ill and I lived a pretty, what I thought, normal lifestyle. Except to say that I was like in a rock and roll band, lived a kind of a rock and roll lifestyle. So kind of not that normal. And I got ill. And, I was ill for a long time. And it was one of those things that sort of forced me to stop and think. And this is a common story I've heard for a lot of people. Something's happened, they have to stop and revisit their life. I spent a lot of time in introspection, started reflecting on things that I've been doing. Oh gosh, maybe nature is actually, maybe food that's come from nature is a better idea than food out of a packet. Maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah. And just one thing led to another, like a process of searching and searching. And ultimately, I was with a naturopath who had been to a seminar with Dr. Ray a couple of weeks earlier, and she was just bubbling about her experience. And I don't know why I'm telling you this. And, I was kind of all ears at the stage thinking, hang on, I'm pretty sure I know why you're telling me this. Keep going. And so she told me about him, and he was still in Auckland, and he had another seminar coming up in a couple of weeks, which I went to, and the rest, as I say, is history. Except to say, by the time I'd found out enough about body electronics and how to get myself well, I'd kind of become qualified as well, which I think is also another common path. People come into practices as a healer and they had no intention of becoming one, but life had other plans. So that's kind of the short story about how I got into it. I kind of want to park exactly what body electronics is for a second, because in some ways it's kind of easy to talk about how it came about before saying what it is, because sometimes people ask, well, what isn't it, after you've said what it is. But John Ray, who you mentioned, back in the early 60s, had basically been praying for illumination, as people do, and he had this white light experience, which essentially, the room was taken over, a voice has come into his head and explained something which was quite simple but profound, and then he then spent the rest of his life coming to an understanding of what that was. And he had been interested, his older brother, who was into naturopathy and stuff, and so he was kind of interested in trying out some ideas that were a bit different. Like if you have acupuncture or acupressure, and you apply pressure on a point in someone's body for a few seconds, and maybe it can produce some kind of help for the person. What would it be like if you just kept on holding it and kept on holding it and kept on holding it? What would eventually happen? And at this time, he was the coach on a basketball team, and he had a player who'd injured himself on the field. And actually, I have to back up. There was another story before this. The very first one was a guy who was in his university class, and he had what John described as a bunny tail, a kind of a sort of a calcification or a lump on his sacrum or coccyx, so the tailbone. And so he wanted to try this out. So they put pressure on this, and they put pressure on it, and he worked on this for 18 hours straight, which is like, why would anyone actually think, let's just do this for 18 hours? No one would think this. But they just put this on, because what happened is all the stuff started happening, and it was like, well, let's keep on doing it then. And the long and short of it was that this lump on his tailbone disappeared, admittedly after some pretty hard work. And to be fair, to be accurate, this is not sort of trying to rub or massage it out. This is not a sort of like a friction technique. It's not trying to move or manipulate the thing. It's just holding still on it. And he tried this on and off again with a few different people, and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. So fast forward to this guy on the basketball team that I mentioned. The guy had this injury on the court. He said, look, do you want to get back on the team? Well, yeah, I do, coach, but I've had this injury. I can't do it for, doctor says 6 weeks. He says, well, how about we see if we can fix you tonight? And they worked through this, and lo and behold, he was able to recover from his muscle injury and be back on the court.
Wow.
So that's kind of like a miraculous thing, and it's kind of where it began, and people go, oh, gee, that's a miracle. And when you don't really understand it, anything that is like got some sort of high principle behind it seems miraculous. But once you kind of dig into it, and once you get to understand it and you're learning about it, you start seeing, actually, there's something that can be replicated here. There's actually a technique. Mm-hmm. And this is what he then figured out over the next, 10 or so years. He practiced body electronics in the US, sort of late 70s through to the late 80s. And he would move all around the States. So there's pockets of people all through the States who have had some sort of experience with John in the 80s. But unfortunately, what happens with these things is it's not just a physical healing thing. And sometimes people get kind of upset when someone heals from something that supposedly they can't heal from. They have, you've kind of made peace with the fact that someone's maybe going to die. And then someone comes along and they recover, and it's kind of like, well, hang on a minute, how did you do this? What doctor did you see? I didn't go and see a doctor. I saw this guy who, held my points, and I kind of got better. And some people are really accepting of this and go, well, that's wonderful. And other people are like, this is weird. Is this some kind of black magic? Is it is it the devil's work? Is it is this against the law? And doctors would get upset. It's like, well, hang on a minute, this could have been dangerous. This could have turned out the other way, and this could have really been a bad thing. How dare this person go around doing these things that and consequently he was often had to leave areas because there'd be a pocket of people who were being helped and this other pocket of people who were kind of offended by it.
Pretty typical in the States here. They don't want anybody to get wet better, but
yeah, it's kind of, I mean, he told the story. There are so many of them that he's told, and you kind of think it's amazing how much resistance there can be, but there it is. And people like Bob Stevens is the way John always talked about him. Body electronics is one of those things where we definitely stand on the shoulders of everyone who's come before us in this work. And, John often talked about people who have paid the price of pain beforehand. And, Bob's an example of that. Is people who have been dedicated to this work, who've done a lot of point holding, have done a lot of work for other people. And you have to go through a lot of your own stuff, You can't just be like a healer without entering into it yourself and kind of going through your own healing. And body electronics it's intense. The premise now is that you are going to re-experience traumas from your past and re-experience them quite literally in your mind. So you're not sort of going, if I broke a leg in the past, we're not going to go and break your leg again. But it is going to feel like your leg is being broken right now because of the degree of specific memory we work towards getting of that. And when you're really in touch with it, you feel all that pain, you feel all of the other suppressed emotionality, and there always is suppressed emotionality. So there's always going to be suppressed pain because we don't like the pain, so we don't want to feel it. So we're fighting against it, we suppress it. And we have anger that comes up. And anger is kind of like this one-pointedness, this desire to control initially the pain, but it becomes we start controlling everything to do with this leg breaking situation. And but the anger can get quite intense, and we might not be able to control the anger itself, and we suppress that. And then we have this withdrawal from this, which is like an escape, running away from the anger or the control, which is fear. And the fear is also intense. So it's no matter what you do to get away from one level of intense emotionality, the next level of emotionality, which is also intense, is right there to be experienced as well. And this suppression goes on and on. You end up with this grief, which is like a victim mode. You can't do anything about it anymore. You end up with this apathy, like, well, I just can't do anything about it anymore. And then eventually what we call unconsciousness, which is that you've kind of forgotten. You remember your leg is broken, but you don't really remember any of the detail, all this other junk that's gone with it. And our aim is to remember all of that. And it's not enjoyable because we didn't enjoy it the first time. That's why we suppressed it. It was big enough and gnarly enough for us to not like it.
Push it down.
Yeah, to push it down. And as we start to remember it, we remember that same desire to push it down again as well. And that's not everyone's cup of tea.
Yeah, definitely can be painful for sure. But some other things, the other side of it, once you actually acknowledge it or sit with it, the miracles are behind on the other side of that. It's just not everything takes 18 hours, thank God. But I was a part of some, I've only done one workshop. I'm sure you've done tons. But we've seen some where it was, an hour or two of holding things. And so in a nutshell, what my understanding of, just for people watching who don't really get what happens, is when we do suppress whatever we're suppressing, it goes into the body, and it can hold wherever that place it ends up holding, but then it calcifies on top of it to kind of seal it in. And I look at everything with vibration, frequency, and I have a book called The Science of Miracles, and I talk a lot about the biofield. And for me, just studying science, we know that our body radiates a certain frequency or vibration, and then our body also magnetizes, our heart specifically will magnetize back to us. So what I loved about body electron, and what I do love about body electronics, is a lot of times people will be stuck in these patterns that they don't understand why they're stuck in these patterns. And it could be something that's so subconscious or pressed down, that's calcified over, that you can't get to literally unless you do something like this. And or it could even be ancestral, which is in your cells, and can be in your body or whatever. So that frequency, that code, goes out into the field, and it radiates, and it bumps into whoever, and then it looks, for a magnet to come back, something that we only get what we are. So whatever we're putting out is what we get back. And so what was really fascinating to me is, let's say someone always has a certain pattern, and they're like, oh my gosh, and they've done all the things, they've changed their diet, their mindset, their whatever, but they're still getting this repeat pattern. And what if it is underneath this calcified thing that is sending out an electric current, a victim thing, a grief thing, or an anger thing, and then they keep attracting anger or grief to them, and they're like, why does this keep showing up? And it's like, what I love about it is, if we could get to that point, melt it, whatever it is that happens, you can go into that dissolving part, and then get to the actual emotion of what, and experience it, feel it, love it, be with it, sit with it, and then it goes away. Then you not only have a physical difference that's going on, but you have an electronic difference, because the radiation is now missing that code, and you'll have more of you and your essence, more of God, source, all the things that you are to express and radiate, which will get a better match coming forward in the future. But if we're these things that are hidden and covered, literally, this is an uncovering. This is a fruitful way to physically experience removing that, so you do have a different expression, therefore you get a different, more positive outcome, and those patterns just literally dissolve. But I talked to somebody who was in a session, and she was smelling like, and everyone there too was smelling like a burning smell. And come to find out, I think it was her grandmother that was a part of the World War II, or the whole Nazi Germany thing. And, there were people who were put in ovens, and, she had a memory of something that wasn't hers, but she knew it was like her grandmother who was killed in this oven. And so, can you share a little bit about how in the world that could happen?
Yeah.
Or have you ever experienced things like that with
Yes.
smells
Yeah.
or tastes or things like that came up?
Yeah. No, it's, I wouldn't say it's common, but it certainly does happen. I think the first thing is probably just to back up a second. I mean, I'm sure everyone on your channel already appreciates that we're more than just a physical body. We have an emotional body, we have like a mental body, whatever names you want to give those. And so things that we experience in our mind or emotionally will eventually manifest into our body, because the body is just an extension of all of those other parts of us, and we're all interconnected. So when we suppress something emotionally, it starts to materialize in the body. And that's the crystal you talked about, is that physical manifestation of the energy that's been suppressed. And the crystal itself, rather than covering the emotionality, it's actually the physical encoding of the emotionality. So that crystal is like a computer chip. It's like it is storing the memory of your suppression.
Wow.
So when you apply pressure to the crystal, and this happens in a lab, you know, if you apply pressure to a crystal, you have a thing called the piezoelectric effect.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you apply pressure to a crystal, it emits a little electric charge, and that's what's happening in your body. You apply pressure to a crystal in your body, and it starts to dissolve. It's releasing the stored, suppressed trauma, memory, emotionality stuff. So you are starting to experience the reactive content, the suppressed content of your mind as that crystal dissolves. So all the way through that process, you're making gains because you are starting to re-experience the trauma. Of course, how far you get through it is the thing. And like you say, an hour, 2 hours is pretty common these days. It wasn't back in the 80s. These 18-hour, 16-hour, 12-hour sessions were like really commonplace. And you know what John had said about this is that this is, you know, I mentioned the price of pain that people have paid. The people who have done this before have actually helped out everyone else who does this afterwards, because we're not just dissolving our own stuff. There's a collective level that we're all tied in to certain things. You know, far enough back up a tree, if you like, we are ultimately connected quite profoundly. And when any of us starts to really do some decent work on ourselves, it helps other people. And in body electronics, the effect of that is that these sessions that used to be really hard and long are no longer hard and long. I mean, they can be hard, but they're not necessarily, you know, protracted, like I mentioned. Just for everyone's reassurance.
Yeah.
But yeah, so this crystal is dissolving, it's releasing the suppressed energy that's in there. Now we can have these suppressed energies that are from our personal experience. I can kick my foot against the table when I'm a child, and I can, you know, wow, this is horrible. And, you know, I can grow up with a calcification on my toe. And we could apply pressure to that calcification, and you remember all the crying and how you kicked the table and how you thought, you know, where's mum? Mum's never here. Mum doesn't love me. And all these decisions you've made in this moment of trauma.
Did you just make that up?
Oh yeah, well this is the common sort of stuff that people go through. It's
oh my gosh, because I literally, my sister broke my toe underneath the table on my birthday, on my 10th birthday, and literally you're like reading my mail here, like that. I do have like a deformed foot from that still to this day. But anyway, go ahead. That's pretty interesting that you brought that up.
Yeah, well, people have these experiences, and the key thing is that trauma is in the eye of the beholder. So it's not about whether the event really is traumatic in some absolute sense. What matters is it traumatic to you? And when you see a child, they could kick the table and be laughing about it the next moment, or they can kick the table and be absolutely, you know, traumatized by it. So the difference is just some decision that's gone on in their mind at that moment. Mm-hmm. And when they're laughing about it, no biggie. And when they're crying and screaming about it, yeah, it's becoming a biggie, and it's starting to form into their body.
Wow.
Where your example comes up and is a bit tricky to explain is our physical body is what it is, and we have children, and we pass on our genes.
Yes.
And you see the physical similarities between the children and the parents. You can also inherit some of this traumatic experience because we have suppressed it into our tissues, and there is therefore an overlay on our genetic structure. And that genetic overlay can be inherited as well. So children can literally inherit the reactive patterns of their parents. It's not, you know, you don't have to, but it can happen. Mm-hmm. And therefore a child can go through genetic memory. They can go through the experience of, you know, parent, grandparent, great-grandparent, people they don't even know they're necessarily related to, potentially people you're not related to, because ultimately we are all connected. One person had gone through an experience on the table, was holding his clavicle, and he went through this stabbing sensation, which ultimately he had this memory of, like, I don't know how else to say this. Like, I'm just going to say it how it is. I'm lying on a battlefield and someone's just stuck a bayonet through my shoulder. And he afterwards, after the experience, he'd sort of done some thinking about this and concluded actually his grandfather, or maybe his great-grandfather, had been in the Civil War and had been impaled, and that's how he died on the battlefield. And so, you know, we can never be sure about these things, but the speculation is that, yeah, I've actually re-experienced something that my forebears have actually gone through.
Yeah, I had a similar situation where there was a guy waking up in the middle of the night every night at like 2 a.m. and he would say, I pay attention to words because of Robert and conscious language, and he would say things like he felt like he was freezing to death and cancel clear, but he kept, you know, he went to all the doctors, he went to the psychologist, the psychiatrist, like all of these things, and it just, there was no explanation, and it never happened all, you know, his life until he turned 21. And when we looked into some things, you know, it was like, you know, you said this, and, you know, where does that come from, and blah blah blah, and do you have anyone in your family that's ever frozen to death? And it turned out, I think it was his uncle who had passed at 21 on a camping trip, and something happened and whatever, and he froze to death, and somehow, so he was just like living out, you know, what, some pattern, you know, that and this was not even a parent, you know, it was an uncle. And I've seen this a lot with even when I work with a guy, Dr. Lucky, and I've been in many sessions with him where he's had to say, well, your aunt on your dad's side, your great aunt on your grandfather's side, blah blah blah. What is that person's name? Da 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 da. And people won't even know. They literally have to make phone calls and say, what was that person's name? Did they ever have a miscarriage, or did they ever have this going on, or whatever? And it turns out there's a pattern that's come all the way down, even from way way back, and we just keep on going until somebody wakes up and puts an end. And like, I love that this work clears forward, you know, to our generations that come down instantly, as we work ourselves out, but also, you know, you said the collective, and also even going back. I mean, it's a forward back clearing, but the whole collective thing, I mean, talk more about that, like how we work with ourselves, and how to explain how you think that clears everybody else.
Yeah. Yeah, in the Bible there's this quote, well, it's one of the commandments, you know, honor thy mother and father, that thy days be long upon the earth. And when you kind of think about those words, it's kind of, hang on a minute, why is it that my days will be longer if I honor my mother and father? Whose benefit is this commandment for? And we kind of think of the honoring mother and father part. I should be respectful, and, you know, I should honor my source and so on. But you are the product of your source. And if you can't honor your source, it's very hard to honor yourself.
Wow.
So that's like the genetic aspect of it. We're kind of, yeah, it's forward and it's backwards. We are looking back into our source. We're not looking with the intention of looking back into our source, but we certainly are looking into our source. And all these other things may come up, and we're able to potentially clear them, which is a benefit to our children. So we can be, in effect, paying it forward because we are clearing our junk that we're not passing on to our kids. So, you know, one less problem for them. So yeah, it works in both directions in that sense. And then we have a thing called the morphogenetic field, which is kind of part of our body. As some people call it an aura, perhaps. I'm not sure they're entirely the same thing, but it's an electrical field around our body. And family members have a resonance between them naturally, because we're so close from a genetic source, and possibly the people we're living with are people we've lived with before. We have, like, we're going through, if you're into multiple lives, we've embodied before with a certain group of people, and here we are again with some of those same people. We don't necessarily recognize them or know them. We're not necessarily even close with them in this life, but they are existing in this lifetime as well.
Wow.
We may be very close to them, and we share a resonance with those people. And then beyond that, if someone's got a pattern like I'm freezing to death, who else has been through that same pattern? And might you, if you go through this thoroughly, as a result of you overcoming your resistance to one particular pattern, might that make it easier for somebody else to overcome their resistance to that pattern? Because you've done some of the work. There's this collective resistance to I'm freezing to death, because a lot of people have been through that over time. And each time one person undoes their part of it, the collective burden is a little bit less. And it's a bit easier for some other person to then come along and do that. And some really profound examples and simple ones are, like, someone goes through point holding, maybe their hair color changes as a result of going through the point holding. That's happened.
Really?
And then the funny thing is, they go and tell their friends about it, their family about it. And then they're like, hang on a minute, didn't your hair used to be grey too? And this other person in the family's experiences hair color change at the same time as this other person has. Or someone rings someone up in the middle of the night saying, hey, did you ever have this thing happen to you? I said, yeah, I've just had a dream about this happening to me. Funny you should phone me just now. We're so connected, it's not funny. We see ourselves as separate, and that's just an illusion of the universe. We see our physical body. We look like all these individual islands, but it's just an error of our vision, really. We have either lost the ability, or perhaps it's part of the design to not have that ability to see the interconnectedness that exists all the time. And if we really go through something on a deep level, why shouldn't it affect somebody else?
Absolutely. I love it. And, I think there's so much programming about fixing other people, and like blame and everyone else being the problem, and that whole victim program that's on the planet anyway. And, I like to tell people and encourage people, to figure out, like, where did this start? Like, what did you do to create that? And, or, take ownership of anything that you or I may need to take ownership of, instead of, doing all the he did this and she did that, and, trying to, figure it out. And when we do that, and we're conscious of what we're doing, maybe there'll be better choices and, better boundaries, and, instead of just all the blame and everything, but that it seems to be a big program of, it's like everybody else's problem, everybody else's fault. And I didn't know a lot about this energy stuff until I really started working with Bob, because he had told me that I needed to clear something up with a childhood friend that I couldn't find at the time. And I just looked all over Facebook, asked friends, tried to contact his family, like all of this stuff, and just didn't have a whole lot of luck, finding this person to even make amends, or, do whatever needed to be cleared to move on. And I finally did find the person. And when I did, I reached out, and then it was pretty much a no-go, like, to even talk anymore or anything. It was like, what do you want? And it was very, like, abrasive and stuff. And so I reached out to Bob, and I said, what do I do if I can't talk to the person? Like, the person won't talk to me, blah, blah, blah. And he was like, honey, he's like, he always called me Angel. He's like, Angel, everything is energy. You don't have to talk to him physically. Just say whatever you would say, as if he's standing in front of you. Have a little conversation energetically. And do you know, I went out that night and walked around and just had a walk with myself and imagined talking to this person walking with me and just having this not even out loud conversation, just a mental conversation with the person as if they were walking with me. And then I came back to my house and I laid in my driveway and I looked up at the stars and I was like, okay, God, please, like, let's just remove this program. And literally my phone was sitting next to me and it rang. It was 11 o'clock at night. And the person was calling me saying that they would be okay to meet with me now. And I was like, wow,
Awesome.
this is so huge that everything is energy, and even that kind of stuff, it's like we have so much power. And I don't know if we were really taught how powerful we really are.
Mm. That's great. I love that. Yeah, the word used before about being conscious, I think, is the pivotal point, because I believe we were created perfect to be perfect. Which it says in the Bible, right? Be ye perfect. And we're in this universe. This is my sort of view of cosmology, if you like. We're in this universe, which is a really illusory place, but for a really good reason, because we have to navigate this maze to come to a position of responsibility for the stuff that we create. And ultimately, in body electronics, what we're trying to do is we talk about encompassing the duality, and which means to become aware of being the effect of your creation and becoming aware of being the creator of the effect at the same time. So that's the only time you can really be responsible for your creation, is when you can see in the moment, okay, I can see that I can do this thing. I can see what the effect of this thing is going to be. I can accept the effect of this thing, and I'm happy to still create it. And I can do these things together. Now there's no resistance, because I'm able to be responsible for my creation. When we don't see it through or can't see it through, we create, we have this moment of like, oh no, what have I done? And then we're into this path of resistance, and the resistance suppresses the memory. Now we don't have lost the ability to be responsible for that situation. So when you're kind of unpicking all the stuff in the opposite direction now, like you've just been talking about, you're trying to make amends with someone. They don't want to make amends. On the one hand, you are responsible only for you, and you can only actually, control yourself. You can only, forgive. Well, you can forgive other people, but you can't expect someone else to forgive you, because that's their choice. You can hope for their forgiveness, and you can do whatever you feel is in your power to do to perhaps earn that, but it's ultimately over to them. So, what you've said is this great illustration of how this person's been able to reach that point through your effort. Yeah.
Well, talk a little bit, because you have books too, and forgive me that I did not bring them with me. I don't know why that got. Do you have them with you that you can hold up?
Well, let me just find out.
About definitely manifesting, and just some of the other stuff that we're speaking about as far as energy goes. I really do wish that I could find in this book where in the world. I want to say maybe you're in the back part of maybe he quoted you or something, and it gave all your information, and then I found you from there. But you talk a lot about manifestation and creating, and you share a little bit about how you got on that and what your books are about.
Yep. Okay. Well, this
The list
is called The List. Hopefully that's not facing the wrong direction on your camera.
No, it's the right one. It's good.
So this is The List is a concept that John Ray, I would like to say he came up with it, but actually this also was revealed to him through prayer. So he literally had a poem come to him, and this understanding of all the stuff, which he then incorporated into body electronics. And yes, it's about manifestation, But the point of that manifestation is not so much for the sake of you being able to get what you want, which so many manifestation systems are about that. You know, how do I get more money? How do I get more friends, more influence, more power, blah, blah, blah. This is not about how you get those things so much as whether you should get those things. Are they really going to serve you? And I kind of think of this story of, you know, genies in a bottle. You know, you get 3 wishes and he goes, great, 3 wishes, you know. First I'll have $1 million, then I'm going to have fame and success, then I'm going to have, and it's a cautionary tale, right? Every time the genie grants one of the wishes, you're like, oh no, I can't believe I've wished for that, which is actually the archetype for all the stuff we've done before. We create stuff without thinking it through, and then of course we start resisting it. So the list was a tool that John used as a way of helping people cope with all the stuff that came up during the point holding. So if you've got a reactive pattern, that can act a bit like chemistry. Say it's between 2 people in a relationship, or it's between you and your choice of job, or it's the friends in your life, or the kinds of things that happen to you are kind of based to a certain extent on chemistry. Things that you're saying before, you know, are magnetically drawn to you because of your makeup. You're putting something out into the world, and that thing is returning to you as well. Whether you're aware of it or not is another question. But you're putting the stuff out there. What would happen if some of those reactive patterns, you know, virtues you might call them, or a compulsive virtue? So it's I'm a really nice person. I like to help other people. I'm part of a volunteer organization, and I do great work helping other people because I love helping other people. And then you go through a bit of point holding, and maybe you re-experience some sort of trauma, the end result of which is you've realized there's this compulsion to help other people. Now, it's a great thing and everything, and I'm not saying you shouldn't stop helping people, but there's this compulsion associated with it because of this traumatic experience. Where you feel like, oh no, I have to help, and it can be a bit draining sometimes. Sometimes you have to help yourself, and you don't do that. So what if you come back from this point holding session and you're no longer feeling I have to help, and people say, hey, you know, can you come along and help us out in the next thing we're doing? And you go, well, actually no, I kind of realize I've got a choice, and maybe I'll see you next time. And other people get a bit upset about this because you've changed. The thing that held us together is suddenly gone. Why aren't you the same person that you were? I don't like that you've changed, and it can bring up all their stuff. And maybe they can get through that, and maybe they can't. So, you know, it can be, if you've been through profound enough memory, and, you know, when I say go through the memory, you remembering your choices to be the creation, the beginning of something. You remembered all the effect of it. You remember all the creation of it. If you can encompass those 2 things, you're literally uncreating all of the effects of that creation.
Wow.
And when that falls away, the reactive patterns fall away, the chemistry falls away, some of those relationships can fall away, some of those drives can fall away, the motivations, the compulsive aspects of things can fall away, and you might find yourself going, well, heck, now what? And this happens after people get ill as well. You know, they get ill, they fall into a deep period of introspection sometimes, or often, and they start realizing some things, and they want to make some changes. The people around them might be or might not be on board with those changes. How do you navigate this stuff?
Yeah, especially if it's financial in any way. It's like, wait a minute, you have to do this, or if there's some role that they've played, it's like, wait, you have to keep doing that. That's what we do. And then it's like, nope, not doing that.
Yeah. So the list was one of the keywords I like to talk about is karmic completion. All of the stuff that we've resisted becomes karmic for us. In my view, karma is a blessing. It's like a reminder, another opportunity to be confronted with or see something that we didn't want to see because of what happened to us last time we went through it. We didn't like it then, we don't like it now, and we tend to keep on resisting our karma. So good old karma comes back and says, okay, how about this for a reminder? And how I imagine this for myself is that initially there was probably like this little gentle tap on the shoulder saying, "Hey, Graham," and I was like, "No, thanks." And then it's probably like, "Hey, you," and then I'll probably like, "Get away from me." And then eventually I have this idea of like being hit in the face with a wet fish. Come on, pay attention, wake up. This is happening. What are you going to do about it? So I think karma becomes progressively more in our face until we take notice of it, because it's there for our blessing. It's there for the purpose of us doing something.
Yeah,
it's a message.
Louder. It's just like symptoms in the body too. It's like it starts out little, but if you keep ignoring it, it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger until it's like, "Hi, remember me? Remember you?"
I'm back.
But that's awesome. That's awesome.
Well, this is it's a real thing. I think karma is really not. I don't think it's a conceptual kind of thing. I think this is actually a real practical aspect of what's going on in our lives, and I don't know if you can necessarily separate it from the crystals that we're talking about. You could easily say the crystals are just a physical manifestation of that karma, and as soon as we put pressure on the crystals, the memory comes back to us. We're in a position where we can be deliberate about loving or encompassing our memory, our experience, our emotionality, and eventually being free of the traumatic aspect of it. So the list was there to help people put order back into their lives after they've come back. They've had all these changes, say, and it could be it's not only body electronics, it could be anything. People have had some profound changes. How do you navigate your life? How do you put things, pick up the pieces, carve a new path, make sense of things? Maybe some people have been offended by this or by other things that you've done in the past. How are you going to make restitution for some of those things? Making peace. You've got all these things you've started and haven't finished. You suddenly realize, you think, oh gosh, I've left all these things unattended to. And some of those things become energy leaks. They're like a weight.
Definitely.
I always tell this example of in my living room, I had a piece of wallpaper which was peeling. And whenever I walk in the room, I'd see the piece of peeling. It's like magnetically looking up at the piece of wallpaper. I go like, I haven't done this. I need to fix that. It's that, that feeling. Every time I look at the piece of wallpaper, it's like it had control of me. This is how I'm going to feel when I look at the piece of wallpaper, because it doesn't have the power. I gave it the power.
Right.
So profound. Yeah, as a result of not attending to this thing, I have given it the power to control how I'm going to feel and possibly how I'm going to act. That's not a good idea to leave those lying around. So you make a note of them on your list, and you attend to them in due course.
So Bob would always say, "Seek ye first the kingdom, and then all these things will be added unto you." He would always say things like, "Okay, what are 3 things that you haven't done that come to your mind like right now that you just need to take care of right away?" And instantly things will change. And then, okay, go do them. And so that sounds like maybe the list situation where it's like, go do the things. But I never thought of it. My mind is just like, I never thought of it as an energy leak until you just said that. That's the first time I looked at it that way. It's because it's like still there. It's kind of like when you have your phone with all the windows, it's like not a closed window. So it's taking more energy. Is that what you mean? Wow.
That's like that. That's a great example. I never thought of that one. But yeah, your computer's energy is being sucked up by all these open windows. But let's say you leave a shoe lying in the middle of the floor, and you're walking past it, and you go like, "Oh, I better pick up that shoe," but you walk past it anyway. And then a bit later, you walk past it again, and you go like, "I really better pick up that shoe, because the next thing you know is I'll be tripping over the shoe." And then you walk past the shoe, and then a bit later on, you actually trip over the shoe. And why did you have this experience of tripping over the shoe when you actually had these 2 earlier opportunities to see the shoe and realize you should pick it up because it's just been left there? Does it belong in the middle of the floor?
Right.
I guess not. Does it have a home? Maybe it doesn't, but maybe it should have a home. but we have put the shoe on the floor.
Yes.
Or someone else has put the shoe on the floor, but we have left it there. So we are responsible on a creative level for that shoe being there, and therefore the things that come about because of it. And we're giving it that energy. We're giving it that power.
This is like, I'm literally like thinking of all of this is making me think about so many different things right now. So I think I might have needed this interview more than anybody out there. I'm just so glad I found you, and just that I followed my synchronicities, and like, you know, you get these random things, they're not random. You know, it's like I found this book, but in the book was you. And then, you know, it's like I just followed that unction. You know, you were talking about the tapping on the shoulder. I'm like, I gotta contact this guy. I gotta get this book. I gotta do the thing. And then I got your books, and I was like, I gotta have him on the show. And it's just like now it's opening up and unfolding even more. So are you doing, so you have sessions, you have your work where you are. Tell us where you are, what you're doing, what people can get your, how people can get your book or connect with you, because I wish you lived closer. I know.
Yeah, New Zealand's quite a way from the rest of the world, and in many ways that's one of the great things about New Zealand, that it's so far away, because we, on the downside, perhaps have a false sense of security about things in the world because they're so far away from us. But it's by and large, I'm quite happy living here. I practiced quite intently in the 90s and the early 2000s, and I spent a lot of time with John in the last couple of years of his life, involved in a course of his called the Visualization and Consciousness course, and that was a thing that he taught only by invitation. And there was like body electronics, point holding, but then there was the next level, which doesn't involve any point holding.
Oh, wow.
It is literally we're now going to work on this. I'm just going to ask you some questions. I hadn't really intended to get into this, but we use a thing called a meter, which is it's a galvanic skin response meter. It's literally just measuring your skin resistance.
Okay.
And when you think about things that you love, the meter responds in one particular way. And when you think about things that you don't love, it responds in this way. Your body literally reacts to your thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can see that, you've suddenly got a map for navigating to, oh, I can see that you're kind of resisting this, and I can see that you're not resisting this. Let's ask a few more questions about the stuff that you're not resisting. And this kind of sounds a bit counterintuitive, but actually this is the concept of the list again, is, out of all the things we could do, the thing that we should do is the thing that's simple to do. Because we could try the thing that feels important to us. Oh, look, I really need to overcome this problem with me injuring my toes. It's important in your mind and you're trying to pursue it. You want to overcome it. But actually that's a form of attachment and therefore resistance in its own right. Whereas if someone could say to you, actually, no, let's not look at that right now. Let's have a look at this other thing that you just said where I can see you're not resisting that. Let's look at that, because we can be pretty confident that you can look at that memory without resisting it. Mm-hmm. You're already not resisting it. It's a pretty good chance you're willing to look at more of it. Let's look at that and use that simple thing that you're willing to look at as a way of expanding your awareness and therefore becoming aware of other things which perhaps you weren't willing to experience before. But as a result of growing your willingness ahead of time, you kind of actually you are now ready to confront this thing. So the gift of the meter is that you can navigate it and pick and choose when to go and not go for a certain idea. Where with point holding, you kind of you take a few punts.
Yes. And you need other people. You need a group.
You do need a group. It's like having coals together on a fire. They kind of there's definitely something about the collective energy of people working together. In the list we work on the simple things because you can build a track record and momentum of success quite fast. And we call it faith. There's biblical faith, but there's also this other idea of faith where you can see the end from the beginning, which is not so different from biblical faith anyway.
Yeah.
But being able to see the end from the beginning is like it's a kind of a confidence or a surety. If I do this thing, I can see myself being successful. I can see that I just have to do this and this, and it's going to be done, and it happens. And now you can feel good about yourself. If it was an energy leak you've resolved, perhaps you just put away the shoe, you can definitely see the end from the beginning. I know where the shoe goes. I know I can pick it up and put it there. How about I just do that? Doing that simple thing clears one of the energy leaks, which makes it easier for you to have more energy for other things, which
Yes.
perhaps weren't so easy before.
Yes. Well, was John Ray a big Neville fan, or did Robert just get that on his own?
Oh, that might be one of Bob's. I'm not familiar with that. No.
Oh, Neville was
Yeah.
huge. Yeah, like Bob loved Neville. Like that's what he read. That and Saint Germain, like all the time,
Oh,
every
yeah.
day. That's all he talked about.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so, do you
John was
have
into Saint
a
Germain.
website, or where can people find your books? And
Yeah.
you're not practicing right now, you said, or you are?
Well, I had a family, and I was married, and everything kind of got put on the back burner. And then after a while, it got a bit hard to get it onto the front burner.
Yes.
But I've been sort of slowly sort of kindling those things, and I think you're reaching out is kind of an important moment to help sort of get things started. So I thank you for that.
Of
I think
course.
it's you've talked about how maybe you've needed to hear this, and I've thought about, well, maybe how I've needed to talk about this. So it's kind of nice.
Well, I'm telling you, I'm gonna have to go back and listen a few times because I have like several things that you've said that are so personal, and you're very intuitive. It's almost like you know me or something because you're literally talking to me about so many specific things, but without even trying, and I wasn't even going there. So I love that, and I do hope that people can connect. I'll have your links and different things where people can find your books, and um, but yeah, and I have been to New Zealand 3 times. It's a very
I have.
beautiful place, and they're very healthy. You guys are so healthy over there, and there's health stores and gyms like everywhere, and people. The water is good and so green and beautiful, and well, depending on where you go, but I hope to go back sometime soon. And next time I go, I'll have to connect with you, and maybe we can grab a tea or a coffee or something.
Great.
But take care, and thank you again so much for everything. And I hope to stay connected with you, and we'll see where this goes. But I hope you guys will look more into his work and look into body electronics, the list. And I hope that you apply some of this stuff and really think about what was said today, and what does that mean to you in your situation. Those of you who are watching, we're all going through such a weird season. I know that we were born for this. That's what I heard 3 mornings ago when I woke up. I literally heard, "You are born for this," or "You were born for this," and it literally went through my cells, and I felt it through my body. It literally woke me up. And I know it sounds very Joan of Arc cliche, kind of like Esther in the Bible kind of thing. But it was personal to me. I heard it for myself, and I needed that. And so there might be some things here that resonate with you and where you're at, and some ways to get some help. And I do hope to have a body electronics group together in the next few months. We're looking at maybe doing one with some friends that studied with Bob. And if we do that, I will let you guys know, and maybe you could come participate. And who knows, maybe even Graham will come all the way from New Zealand. We'll see how that works. But you guys have a wonderful evening, and appreciate you guys so much. And thank you again, Graham, for your time, and just for allowing us to be able to spend time with you. Has been just a treasure to me. So I appreciate you so much.
Oh, thank you so much.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, guys. We'll talk soon.
Bye.
See you next week.